Not a vague feeling, not a blurry impression. A world with its own geography, its own people, its own emotional weight. Maybe you were somewhere impossible. Maybe someone was there who shouldn't have been. Maybe you felt something so specific, so textured, that it stayed with you for a few seconds after you opened your eyes. And then it was gone. Not hidden somewhere you can't access, not filed away in a part of memory you can't reach. Gone. Vanished with a speed and completeness that's almost violent if you pay attention to it. Where did it go? That sounds like a poetic question, the kind of thing someone asks at 3 a.m., not in a laboratory. But it's actually one of the most precise and interesting questions in neuroscience. And following it all the way down dismantles several things you assumed about memory, about experience, and about what it means for something to be real. Start here. What is a dream exactly? The common picture is that a dream is something that happens to you. A movie playing in the sleeping brain. Passive, received. You're the audience. That's wrong. And it's wrong in a way that matters. During REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs, the brain is not resting. It's running at near waking levels of metabolic activity. If you were measuring electrical activity in the brain, you'd see patterns almost indistinguishable from an awake, engaged mind. The brain isn't powering down, it's doing something. What it's doing is building a world. The visual cortex is firing, generating imagery without any light entering the eyes. The hippocampus is active, pulling fragments of memory and experience. The amygdala is highly engaged, generating emotional content, sometimes intensely so. What's suppressed, and this is the crucial part, is the prefrontal cortex, the region most responsible for rational evaluation, for asking, does this make sense? Is this real? Should I question what I'm experiencing? With that evaluator offline, the brain generates experience without critique. It builds a world, a completely internally sourced reality, and then inhabits it. You're not watching. You're constructing and simultaneously living inside what you constructed, without any part of you stepping back to notice that you're the architect. That's the mechanism of immersion. That's why dreams feel so completely real while they're happening. And then you wake up, and within minutes it's almost entirely gone. The rate of forgetting is worth stopping at, because it's not normal forgetting. For most experiences, memory fades gradually. You remember less of a conversation after a week than after an hour. The forgetting curve is relatively smooth. Dreams don't follow that curve. Within 5 minutes of waking, most people have lost roughly 50% of the dream content. Within 10 minutes, up to 90% is gone. The collapse is rapid and almost total. Something specific is happening. And it has a chemical explanation. During REM sleep, the brain's neurochemical environment is dramatically different from waking. Two molecules are particularly important here. Acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that drives vivid mental imagery, that promotes associative and loose thinking, is at peak levels during REM sleep. It's partly responsible for the richness of dream experience, the strangeness, the vividness, the way one scene dissolves into another without your questioning it. Norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter essential for consolidating memories, for writing new experiences into long-term storage, is almost completely absent during REM sleep, nearly zero. The brain that is generating the most vivid experience it will generate all day is simultaneously operating in a state that prevents that experience from being stored. The combination is precise and specific. Maximum vividness, near zero consolidation. The dream feels real, and the brain is chemically unable to remember it. So when you ask where the dream goes when you wake up, the answer at the neurochemical level is that it doesn't go anywhere. It was never stored. You experienced something fully, and the neural substrate that would normally capture that experience for later retrieval wasn't doing its job. Not because it was broken, because during REM sleep it's specifically turned off. That raises an obvious question. If the brain goes to the trouble of creating REM sleep, if it defends REM sleep aggressively, compensating for lost REM whenever it's deprived, why would it build a system that generates vivid experience and then immediately erases it? One answer is that the erasure is the point. Francis Crick, who you might know as the co-discoverer of DNA, spent part of his later career thinking about dreams. With Graeme Mitchison, he proposed what they called the reverse learning hypothesis. The idea is this. During the day, the brain accumulates noise, overlapping associations, redundant connections, parasitic patterns that interfere with clean recall and clear thinking. REM sleep, in this model, is a kind of maintenance cycle. The brain fires these noisy patterns, activates them, and then suppresses them, weakens the connections that don't need to be there, clears the interference. In this framework, you're supposed to forget your dreams. The content of the dream is the garbage being taken out. Remembering it would be like retrieving what you put in the trash. The forgetting isn't a failure of the system. It's the system working exactly as intended. That's an uncomfortable idea if you find dreams meaningful. But it's a serious scientific proposal. And it reframes the question completely. Not why do we forget dreams, but why would we ever remember them? Now I want to talk about what happens in those specific seconds when you first wake up, because there's a window, brief and strange, where the dream is still partially present. It's called the hypnopompic state, the transitional zone between sleep and full waking. Brain imaging during this transition shows something interesting. The prefrontal cortex comes back online gradually, not all at once. For a few seconds, you're running both programs simultaneously, the dreaming brain and the waking brain, overlapping. This is when the dream is still there, accessible if you reach for it immediately and nothing interrupts you. But here's what collapses it: any engagement with the waking world. An alarm, a sound, a thought about what you need to do today. The waking brain, once it gets traction, runs a different neurochemical program entirely, and that program has no architecture for holding dream content. It's not that the waking brain pushes the dream out, it's that the waking brain is simply not built to accommodate it. The dream doesn't get erased, it just has nowhere to live in the newly awake mind. This is why people who lie still after waking, who don't immediately engage with the external world, remember more dreams. They're staying in the overlap zone longer, holding both states open simultaneously before the waking program fully takes over. Now, why do some dreams stay? Because not all dreams vanish completely. Some stay for hours, some stay forever. And the pattern of what survives is not random. The dreams most reliably remembered are the ones most saturated with emotion. Fear, grief, intense joy, desire, these dramatically increase dream recall. Nightmares are the most reliably remembered dreams of all. Not because they're more vivid, many non-emotional dreams are equally vivid. Because emotion activates the amygdala, and the amygdala has direct connections to memory consolidation systems. Strong emotional activation appears to partially compensate for the norepinephrine deficit. Not enough to save the whole dream, but enough to leave traces, emotional residue, fragments of imagery, a sense that something happened even when the content is gone. This is a precise finding. And it tells us something that goes beyond dreams. The brain keeps what it was moved by. Vividness alone isn't enough. Significance, measured by emotional charge, is what partially overcomes the chemical barrier to storage. That's not just a rule about dreams, That's a rule about memory, made visible by the extreme conditions of dreaming. And then there's what I find most interesting, what the dream leaves behind even when the dream itself is gone. Emotions carry over. You wake up anxious or peaceful or vaguely sad, and you can't locate why. The feeling outlasted the content. The emotional state generated during the dream persists into waking, even when the narrative that generated it is completely gone. Problem solving carries over. REM sleep is consistently associated with enhanced insight, the ability to find non-obvious connections between ideas. Research by Ulrich Wagner at the University of Lübeck showed that people who slept between learning a problem and testing it were significantly more likely to find a hidden shortcut solution than people who stayed awake. The connections made during dreaming, the loose, associative, rule-free thinking that REM enables, persist in the form of new neural connections, even when the dream that made them doesn't. And sometimes the specific content survives just long enough to change everything. Auguste Kekulé was working on the structure of benzene, a problem that had resisted solution for years. He fell asleep in front of a fire and dreamed of a snake eating its own tail. He woke up and realized the benzene molecule is a ring. One of the most important structural insights in the history of chemistry, arrived at in a dream. Paul McCartney woke up one morning with a complete melody in his head. He thought it must be something he'd heard before. It was too finished to have come from nowhere. He played it for everyone he knew, asking if they recognized it. Nobody did. The melody was Yesterday, one of the most recorded songs in history, delivered complete from a dream. In both cases, the dream left the answer and erased the question. The insight arrived without its packaging. The solution survived. The process that generated it vanished. The dream was gone. But it wasn't nothing. And now I want to take you to the place where the neuroscience runs out. Because everything I've described so far, the neurochemistry, the memory consolidation, the emotional tagging, the creative residue, all of that is mechanism. It describes how. It doesn't touch why. Why does the brain generate something that feels like a world? Not just why does it process information during sleep? That's the easy question. The hard question is, why is there something it feels like? Why does the dream have an experiential quality at all? Why isn't the processing just happening in the dark, silently, efficiently, with no subjective dimension? The brain is running complex computations during REM sleep. Fine. But why do those computations feel like anything from the inside? Why does the constructed world feel vivid? Why does the constructed emotion feel real? Why is there a you in the dream, experiencing it, rather than just a brain running patterns in the dark? That's the hard problem of consciousness, applied to the dreaming brain. And it has no answer. We know the neurochemistry of dream forgetting. We know the functional purpose of REM sleep. We know the emotional tagging system that lets some dreams survive. We can map what the brain is doing during every stage of sleep with remarkable precision. What we cannot explain is why the dream felt like anything at all. And that means the disappearance of the dream, the thing we started with, is only the surface of the mystery. The deeper mystery is why there was something there to disappear, why the dream was a world rather than just a process, why you were inside it rather than nowhere. The dream vanishes when you wake up. The neuroscience tells us why it can't be stored. The chemistry of norepinephrine, the suppression of consolidation, the absence of the mechanism that would write the experience to long-term memory. But here's what stays with me. You lived in that world, fully, completely, with the entire subjective weight of real experience. and it left almost no trace. The experience happened, genuinely happened, with the full quality of being alive inside it, and then it was gone, as completely as if it never occurred. Which forces the question that I think is the real one underneath all the others. If an experience leaves no record, if it was real from the inside and vanished from the outside, in what sense did it happen? I don't have an answer. Nobody does. Neuroscience can tell you where the dream went. It can't tell you what it meant that it was there. Every night you build a world. You live in it completely. And then you wake up and it's gone. And most mornings you don't even notice. That seems worth noticing.